Okay, thank you very much for joining us in this online presentation. I hope that within the circumstances you are everyone well. I'm Miren Pastor. I'm the co-director with Olmo González of Fiebre Photobook Festival, and we are very excited to present this publication with the Colombian photographer Juan Orrantia, based in South Africa, and Sonia Berger, co-editor of the book with Fiebre. Before I start, I wanted to put in context a little bit this publication because it's the result of the 4th edition in our Dummy Award, and we are very grateful to be able to have a great team of professionals that make possible this call. Artes Gráficas Palermo is the main sponsor. They help us with the production together with La Troupe. They have carried out the photomechanic and pre-press work. Dalpine, one more year, has joined us, giving the support to co-publish and distributing the book. Art Photo Barcelona also adds forces, offering the context of the festival to present and exhibit the project. And as the date has been postponed to October, in autumn we could enjoy the exhibition in Barcelona. So now let's focus in the project with the author and the publisher. And keep attention because at the end we will reveal a very important news. So thank you very much in the name of all the team, and enjoy it.
Thank you very much, Miren. Hello, Juan. How are you?
Good. Hello.
Hello. So yeah, first of all, thank you, Juan, and I want to thank you also in the name of all the group of people who's been working with you in your book. And as Miren said, is Artes Gráficas Palermo for the printing, La Troupe for the pre-press work, and Jaime Narváez Rivero for the design. And then Fiebre and Dalpine, we've been working together to publish your book. And yeah, thank you so much for trusting us, your work. Yeah. It's been beautiful working with you. So we are really, really happy with the results. Here it is, the book. And yeah, you got one. I would like to start by talking about your background. In the short biography we have published along with the book, we know you have been awarded several grants, like a Smithsonian Artist Fellowship, Tierney Fellowship in Photography, and that you have exhibited your work in places and venues such as Rencontre de Bamako, Centro de la Imagen in Mexico City, or Lisbon Photobook Fair. And we also know by this biography that you have had an MFA in photography from Hartford Art School last year, and that you have also a BA in anthropology. So I would like to know, how was this transition from anthropology into photography done? What was the interest? What is the link between those two disciplines?
So, well, first of all, let me say thank you to the whole team. I think, well, it was really a pleasure to work with everyone, and it was also amazing to see everybody working amidst these circumstances right now, and that was amazing to see as well. And I really thank and appreciate everybody for that, because the result, I think, is this beautiful book that we now have in our hands.
Thank you.
So no, it was a pleasure working with you all, really. About the transition, in a way, it's a weird transition because I never really did much with the anthropology, but I was always very interested in the visual and the relationship that anthropology has with the visual. And that obviously has always given me like a very strong emphasis or foundations in questions of representations. And I think that is why the idea and the question of representation is coming across all my photographic work. But before kind of focusing more on photography, while I was kind of studying anthropology, I was always kind of very concerned with working with the image itself. So I was interested in the essay film, in experimental documentary, in forms that question ideas of documentary truth that are very reflexive. And that's in a way how I kind of got into working much more visually. And through that, then I started to work much more photographically. I saw that, that within the still image, I had a lot of possibilities as well. And so then based on that is when I decided a few years ago to then do the MFA from Hartford, which kind of pushed me into this what is now this book.
This work, particularly, yeah.
Exactly.
So, so around 10 years ago, you moved to South Africa, and there you continued studying photography, and you have been developing projects in Mozambique and Guinea-Bissau. So what kind of projects have you been doing during this time?
So I kind of randomly landed a little bit in South Africa. I had done some photographic, more multimedia projects in Colombia, and a little bit in the US with some migrants that I had been working with. So I kind of came with that approach to when I landed in South Africa. And I started to work in Mozambique with questions about like representation, about memory, about living in the post-war. I was very interested in how to engage the idea of the aftermath of war without going the photojournalistic route of showing the obvious sequels of war, but trying to get a bit more, like from a much more poetic way of trying to get to the layers of how people continue living with these sequels and aftermaths of war. And they were works that were they were combining a lot of text and images, of course, and sometimes a little bit of audio. And that's kind of where I got, I started working on that basically in the continent. And then I kind of decided to, that gave me the grounding to focus more on the still image as well.
So then finally last year you decided to take this MFA in photography, and that's where the project Like Stains of Red Dirt came, well, you start working on it. So the work speaks about your experience of South Africa, and this country is the place where you've been living for the past 10 years, 10, 12 years. So I was, when we first start talking about the book, you mentioned one of the books we have previously published in Dalpine, which is this one, El Blanco by Ricardo Cases. And you mentioned this as a reference because, well, this book, it's a series of images by Ricardo Cases taken in a trip he took to Mali in 2009. And he was there for a few days. So he wasn't sure about how to publish these images because he thought the images alone couldn't tell what he wanted to express. Yeah. So finally he decided to publish them years later, along with the text by Iván del Rey de la Torre. And together the images and the text, they work in a way to express that, to express his lack of legitimacy, to talk about a place that he only knows for in the surface, you know. So he talks about representation, and he talks about those images we carry with us in our heads. So I was asking myself if maybe this book was for you a reference as to if you was feeling something similar to that.
Yes, and
because you took all this long to make your first work on South Africa.
I think when I came across that book, that's why it resonated with me very much, because I don't think there's many works that actually take the question themselves in terms of representation. Many people go to other places, they make the photographs, and the question of why they're doing it or why they cannot do it in a way kind of is left behind. And that's why I was very interested in this book itself. And because that's very similar how I felt at the beginning. And as I realized I was living here longer and longer and longer, I felt very troubled in finding how to talk about this place in a way. It was because of my, let's say, like my own sensibility to questions of representation. And also when I arrived in South Africa, I very quickly started to work with photographers and artists here. And it's very clear how that question here has been being asked for so many years. Like the question of who represents whom is almost like it's part of conversations in photography here, because it's so important to the history of this country. And that was very important for me, but it also kind of made me really think, well, what am I going to say? Who am I? Yes, I'm a Colombian, I'm a white guy. What am I going to say about this place and why? And as time passed and, like I felt much more rooted in the place, but also my daughter had arrived in my house and I was just kind of living and more so I was thinking photographically as well from here, just like from learning and being in this milieu, it really kind of the way of trying to find my own language, my own position was really what drove a lot of this work, which eventually would become this.
So a few days ago, connected to this, I read a text about by Herta Müller, and she was writing about translation. And there is this quote where she says, "It is from the space between languages that images emerge." So for me, it was kind of, it really resonated with your work, like somebody from outside that comes into a country and who's unable at the beginning to speak or to read all these codes and to speak for himself. So in your case, in the end, you have ended up speaking a new language, which is not the language properly we have in South Africa, visually speaking, yeah, and neither the language you were using before. So you have created something totally new. And I think your work and this project is totally related to that too. It's very playful and it's kind of a performance in a way. So I think this project really reflects this cultural hybridization you have. You have created a more mature, subtle language, maybe. So what kind of images we can find in this work? In this case, you have decided to photograph in your house, and what kind of images we find in the book?
Well, thanks for saying that, because it was a bit of a struggle to find that language. Let's say when because of the MFA, I was kind of in a way forced to myself to have to engage with the question, and I think enough time had passed that I think it was a good moment to both things, like to be forced, but also to think about, okay, seriously, how can you engage that question, and how do you create that language for that? So I did their work more or less in like 2 longish years. And I would say the first year was a lot of going out for the immediate, which was going outside and trying to look for those references that I would think would speak for that. And those images were all failures. And it was more through a very kind of simple process later of thinking always between the outside and the inside of the outside also as that world that I'm inhabiting, that's touched me, that has kind of come into my own through my daughter. And also a very simple exercise, you know, visual exercise of just sitting down and starting to appreciate the light, the changing of the colors of the light during the day and during the year in my house. And that really became a metaphor for that outside, in a way, inhabiting my house and realizing that it is from there that I can speak, right? And that is that language through those kind of colors and light, right? But as they touch myself. So as you're saying, like I would say more than 80% of the book is made out of photographs taken inside my house. And a lot of the images they're very varied. There's maybe very few portraits, but most of them are I'm focusing a lot on gestures. I'm focusing on moments. I was very interested also in shadows. I was interested in the way these types of framing, for example, and focusing on details can take you somewhere else, right? And then I started to also work with objects from the plays that could be like references, but in my house, manipulated by me, set up, very constructed scenes. So a lot of the images are spontaneous, more diary-like images that I have with my camera lying around and photographing the everyday in my house. And others are very constructed scenes. When I started to manipulate color as well, it was also a way of, again, you know, like metaphorically thinking about how we see and what we're told, and how it was a question of how we see what we see in a way, and how that becomes a metaphor for questioning categories and stereotypes, for example. So then they're very different images, but they're all tied in a way together by this idea of color.
I like very much how you mix in the book, in the sequence, all those types of images, and how the sequence, you never wanted it to be very clear or very direct. And all these images, or most of them, have something, some reference. Yeah, they work as metaphors for other information or the images. And as we were talking before, you mix your personal experience that you have been able also from this experience to show a little bit of the history and the political context where you live, right? So we can perceive this only at the end of the book. We have introduced, we talked about this a lot when making the book. Should we introduce this information or not? So when you go through the book, you have a very free reading, and you can experience it. And then we decided, and I'm happy with it, to include this legend where you can find some more information on the images, right? More direct information. Yeah, so let's talk about this title first. Like stains of red dirt, it's also a metaphor for something else. Let's give just little information. Yeah.
I think I think the inclusion of those little images, the thumbnails with the titles and some information at the end was really important, and I think it works very well, because for me, all of these moments are the relationship, right? Like a relationship is a bunch of fragments and emotions and different types of situations, and that includes the history of the place, but it also like it touches me, you know, but it's there, but it's not just about that. and all of them then are contained there. But I think it's important also because there's a lot of color, right, and a lot of that kind of going on in the surface, that you don't stay there, because I think the work does want to get to those other almost like underground currents that traverse all of this relationship. And that's why the thumbnails were really important, and I think they do that. But also, and in relationship to the title, I think it's about that. It's about how this, like, when you create an experience, a relationship with a place, things that you like and that you don't like stick to you, right? And there's something here that has always caught my eye, which was the red dirt. That is the color of the earth here, and when the wind blows, or you step on it, that kind of stains you. It sticks to you, almost whether you like it or not, right? Mm-hmm. And that's part of what I'm trying to transmit there. It's also this very kind of ambivalent and convoluted feelings that come together. It's also a reference again then to some of the history of the place, because I was also interested in a little bit of the landscape of where I live, and so Johannesburg being a city built on mines, when the first, when the colonialists, the mine barons built their homes, and certain parts of Johannesburg, they have all of these trees and beautiful plants, and they were actually made to prevent that wind blowing from the mines to stick to their clothes, to their houses, to come inside. And what I wanted was to kind of change that, challenge that, and actually be recognized that this place in a way kind of has touched me in many ways. And that's what the title points to, as many of the little titles in the images do as well.
As well as the plants or trees, some of them, yeah. These are one kind of images you use in your work. Yeah, so color is so important in this book, and so we have this red, looking through red, we have this cover, and this is an element you use also to create your images. So I'm happy we included it in the book as well. And yeah, there is another aspect on color. The book, the very first image we find is a Shirley card. So the color seems to be like this element, this idea that through where you can combine both your research in photography and this idea of a place, right?
So if you take the book like that, and I think that's why it works really nicely with the cover, it's because all of those moments are fragmented, different moments and ways of looking, etc., are inside, and then they're all surrounded, right, by this color, which is also something that you can move, and it also already points to the way that we see things, and they are not necessarily what they seem all the time, right? And so color for me, and when I was saying before, when I started looking at the light here and stuff like that, color in a way is what binds everything, right? Because it kind of comes into my house, right? Literally through the light, and that's what I start to focus on. But color is also really metaphorically and important here. It's like I live in a country that has literally been marked and defined by color.
I'm going to show a few pictures we have here, so we can you see that? Yeah.
Yes, perfect.
Okay.
So color is is what binds it, but it's also like it's defined also the place where I live. It's also very tied to the history of representations of the continent. Like color has been used to create stereotypes, to create images of a place, and I wanted to also question a little bit of that by manipulating the color. And so the Shirley card is also, again, part of this very big history. It refers directly, for people that don't know, the Shirley card was basically a color calibration that Kodak used in their films, in their color films, between the 50s and the 80s. And it was when they were calibrating color film stock, they were calibrating it with white people in mind, with white skin in mind. And so they weren't, so Shirley was the nickname of the calibration card because they used a white model as the skin type to calibrate that, and that produced that that there was a very biased and racialized and racist representation in the film itself, right? In the materiality of photography itself. And questioning that for me was very important for many reasons, right? But I think that's why it's also like a pointer there in the book to how this idea of color and like how we use color correction, for example, and these ideas that certain colors are natural is something that I want to question, because it becomes also a metaphor to question categories and how places and people have been, defined in a way by these ideas and by these techniques and these mediums like photography, for example. So that's where color becomes really important for me, and it's the element that ties the book together and the work together.
So when I read the book, I always have a feeling that your daughter she's a very important character in the book, and that you somehow use light and color in a very playful way in order, maybe, I'm not sure, to explain that color or race is a construction. There is, for instance, this image with the red wig, and here again we have another metaphor for another story, right? Could you develop a little bit this one?
Sure. So yes, I mean, there's a lot of the explanations, let's say, that we give in the book are actually coming from conversations that we have. They're like dinner table conversations about what it means to live in this place, what it means to have a family like many other people have here, but that were illegal 30 years ago. So what does that mean? And the wig, for example, is a very simple moment. It's Halloween, but but I decided to title it with a reference to the pencil test, which was a test they made during apartheid, especially at the beginning of apartheid, to when the regime didn't know if a person would be black or what they term here colored, which is a mix of Indian or somewhere in between, that they couldn't necessarily define it. They would use a pencil in their head. It's a very infamous test. But what's interesting to me with that is that those things also get questioned now. But there's part of the history that we carry, and that in a way has touched me through her. But at the same time, it's also a way of contesting that, right? And questioning that literally just through the simple banality of playing around with hair and the importance of hair, and just the red wig is there in a way almost to, I think we say, like, to give the finger to that pencil test.
You think these ideas are important? It's important to keep the memory and maybe to read the present, because in places where such conflicts had place, even if that was many years ago, it's very difficult to make the transition and to make mentalities change. So we always have to keep fighting again against some remnants of these little ideas, or big ideas in this case. Do you think there is something like that, like you're addressing your daughter in this way?
Yeah, I mean, yes, there's an element of it being, like, for example, yes, race is a construct, but at the same time is very real. Those, and I think that's what I try to keep in mind always in the book. There are things that are very real, but they're also imaginary. And in a way, color works like that. Like the implications of being or looking in one way were very real and are very real for people today, to this day, right? But the categories that define them can be questioned, right? They're ambiguous and they can be questioned. And I think that's what playing with the color does. It's remembering always that you're somewhere between reality and imagination in a way all the time, right? And so So it's the combination of those two in a way that I'm interested in. You know, the way in which we can reify certain truths and certain realities that have definitely affected people and continue to do so, but also the fact that these are things that don't necessarily need to be in certain ways.
Okay. So yeah, a few days ago, Japanese photographer Rinko Kawauchi, she was sharing online an image taken during the lockdown, and she was putting in front of the lens a kaleidoscope, her daughter's kaleidoscope, and she was commenting that this image was for her a gesture that made her understand different possibilities and the variety of the future. So I was instantly thinking about you at home, playing with these colors and with this new language you created, right?
Well, first, I think it's very nice that you bring, you know, somebody like Rinko Kawauchi to this conversation, but also because, I mean, and it's not very tight right now to the question, but I think something and when I was doing this work, I had the opportunity actually of going to Japan and meeting, you know, some of these women photographers that in a way questioned a lot of that kind of very macho provoke black and white, you know, that kind of defined photography for a while. But what I learned, and I think it was a very nice comment that this photographer made about my work, was she was looking at it and she said, look, I don't know anything about South Africa. I don't understand necessarily all of this conversation about politics or anything like that, but I know, I feel something else is going on in the image. You know, like I feel something like a complexity in this banality or something that is behind there. And the way that I started to look at a lot of work, like, for example, you know, like Rinko Kawauchi or Mikiko Hara or, you know, Lia Koshiga, for example, it's the way color is used there in the more banal situations almost gives you that idea. You don't need to understand exactly what's going on, but you know there's something else there. And I think that's what's important in this context as well. You know, you're not trying to paint just a surface picture of this is how things look, but you can try to provide a little bit more. And I think color is a very interesting way of how to get to the idea that there's something else going on. And if you want to find out, well, then you can go and read the captions or, you know, like the titles or
that's
stuff like that.
I think it was important to include them. Yeah, to be more direct. And just one or two last questions. What kind of work has been important for you in the creation of this work? What have been the references?
There's two people that I really learned from, let's say, for like in a way to that helped me think later through the years to this work. Joe Radcliffe and Santu Mofokeng are two South African photographers who I think have developed their own language from their own very personal perspectives on this place to talk about how they see this place. And I think that was very important for me to learn, you know, how from this personal experience and their relationship to this place, they created their own languages for that. Like I was mentioning, like color, you know, like the idea of you know, like these post-provoke, you know, photographers, women photographers in Japan that use a lot of color, and they use it in very different ways, but always like in the most banal and intimate ways. But it doesn't stay there. It goes somewhere else. You know, that was very, very important for me. I think, you know, and then we were talking before about, like, you know, for example, you know, like Ricardo Cassis' work on Mali as well, on how, you know, like how the representations are there. And also, like, not photographically, but for example, something that was always in my mind throughout this work is an essay by a writer, a Kenyan writer that unfortunately passed away not so long ago, Via Vanga Wainena, who wrote a very nice piece that was called How to Write About Africa. And it's an ironic piece on how the continent has been represented, right? And all the stereotypes. And I think that was also important. Yes, and there's photographers also, you know, I mean, Vivian Sasson is always interesting. Some influences are you work with and you work against. And I think there's both elements there, like in her work that I appreciate, but that also I wanted to kind of push a little bit. So those are definitely works that were in my head constantly when I was doing all of this.
Okay. So I think it's, I'm really sorry we don't have an audience today, because I was expecting some questions and little bit more conversation with the audience. Well, then, if you want to add something about the project.
No, yeah, let's, you know, let's say it also, yeah, it was a very kind of unpleasant surprise how this was hacked today. And so we're moving on, we're continuing. And I think that's also very nice that we decided to continue. And no, again, you know, just my thanks to everyone on the team, because I think it managed, you know, the conversation we had and the work that was put into it and the technical and everything else, I think really rounds up the project in a way that I think is very well contained in the book. And I think at least it does it, you know, it expresses very well a lot of the ideas that I was really working with.
There's one thing left, and it's like that we look forward to welcome you in Spain in the autumn, hopefully, right?
As they say, inshallah.
Inshallah, yeah. Okay, so Miren, I think you have some news.
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank you very much, Juan and Sonia. It's an amazing book, an amazing work, and it's been a pleasure working with you. Thanks also again to all the fantastic members of the team. And I wanted also to do a special mention to the designer incorporated this year, Jaime Narváez, because he also has done a great work. Thanks, Jaime. I also wanted to thank you to all the professionals that have participated in the jury, like Valentina Benavoli from Akina Books, Tiffany Jones from Overlaps, Gabriela Zendoya, a famous collector, Photobooks, Aneta and Gregors from Blow Up Press, Laura Carbonell from Punto de Fuga, Fossi Bege, photographer and editor, and Andrew Waite, the winner of the previous Dummy Award. And right now, we are going to announce that tomorrow we will open the 5th edition of our Dummy Award with a few changes in the guidelines, and you will find all the details in our website. In the website, you can find also the information of the other 3 photo books that we have published before with Andrew White, Olga Buscova, and Bernardita Morello. So thank you very much. Take care, and we hope to see you in October in Madrid for the 8th edition of Fiebre, and the second one in Barcelona. So thank you very much to all of you. Bye.
Thank you.
I hope so. And just to say, the pleasure has been all mine as well to be able to work with all of you. So
thank you so much, Juan.
Thanks.
We love your book. And we're really looking forward to welcoming you in Spain.
Yes.
Definitely. Thank you.
For all of you, the book is available in Dalpine, and there you will find all the exhibition, all the information. So thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Okay.